A common mistake that I see photographers make is to believe that low light and bad light is the same thing. And while by definition low light means that there is little light available in your scene, that light that is available to you is actually of really high quality. And key to taking great photos in low light is to know how to read the light. And that's exactly what we're gonna talk about in today's video. And by the end of the video, I hope that you will be able to take photos like these with ease. And now, let's get into it. The first way to read the light is at the same time also my favorite way to read the light, which is backlighting. And backlighting means that you have your subject and you place a bright light source behind your subject. So now you might wonder, how am I going to use this in practice? First of all, you can use shop windows as your backlighting source. And how it effectively works is that you go to the opposite side of the shop window and you wait for a subject to pass in front of that shop window. And what now happens is that you will have this lovely silhouette as the person walks through, backlit by this really bright shop window. And you should also pay attention that your subject is actually interesting. Because if, for instance, the person is wearing an umbrella or a hat, this will make for a nicer story and create some more mystery while also providing a little bit more information of the silhouette, while everything else, like the face, the identity of the person, stays hidden, which is something I really like for my own photography. The next way to use backlighting is to use car lights as your backlighting source. And let's say, for instance, you have a crosswalk in your city and there is people crossing the street. And now there is a car approaching the crosswalk from behind and backlighting the people that cross the street. And what's really nice here is that often this creates an amazing rim light around the texture or around the body of the person walking over the crosswalk. And this is super cool because, again, if this silhouette is a person with a hat, with an umbrella, or with a dog, it creates some really stunning photos, and your subject will immediately stand out much more than if you didn't have this backlighting source. The next way to read the light at night is to use side light. In other words, you want to have your bright light source hitting your subject from the side. So how are we going to put this into practice? Well, if we go back to our shop light example from previously, this time you place yourself on the same side of this shop window. And since now the light source is not hitting the subject from behind, but from the side, which means that the subject is going to be lit on one half of the face, while the other half remains in darkness or is concealed. And by using this side lighting technique, you create depth and texture on your subject and also a certain degree of mystery because we cannot see the full face of the person walking in front of the shop window. And this can be a really impactful technique. Another advice I can give you to make this side lighting effect more impactful is to make sure that there is no other competing light source in your frame, meaning that the shop window is the only light that's lighting up your subject. Why does that matter? Because it's gonna make your subject stand out even more because it's the only thing that's lit by the light source while everything else remains in darkness. And now a pro tip is to actually combine side lighting and backlighting. So you have a shop window that's lighting your subject from the side, and you also have a backlight, like for instance an approaching car that's coming down the street, which can create this really nicely lit scene where you have both a rim light around your subject while also part of the subject is lit. So this is really something you can play around with, but two things have to work at the same time, which is, first of all, you need to have a shop light and you also need to have a backlight, which is often hard to achieve. But when it works, it will be even more fulfilling. The next way to read the light at night is to use overhead lighting. So in other words, your light source is coming from right above the head of your subject. So if we had to put this into practice, imagine that there is an alley and the scene is very dimly lit and you just have a few street lanterns that light up the scene, and now you're gonna wait until the subject is right below your light source, and now the light is hitting the subject from above. In other words, you're gonna have something like a rim light coming from the head, so the head is gonna be lit and the shoulders are gonna be lit, while everything else remains concealed. And why is it a great lighting technique? Well, because there is some degree of mystery involved in the scene, especially when everything is dark around it and you just have this one street lantern that's lighting up your subject from above, creating this really nice effect where most of the person is hidden, and this really just makes the viewer ask questions about who that person is, where that person is going. However, be careful when using this overhead lighting technique, because if you want your subject to be evenly lit by the light source, this is not going to happen if you have the light source right above your head. Well, because it's going to create shadows under the eye, and these shadows are usually not seen as very photogenic, and if you want your subject to be photogenic, then go for something like side lighting, for instance, where you have the face being evenly lit by the light source, which is not the case when using overhead lighting. And now some more general tips on how to put these light reading techniques into practice for the best results. First of all, do not look necessarily for your subject, but look for the brightest light sources in your scene and make your composition dependent on the light sources you find. And especially the bright light sources will be particularly useful, because the brighter the light source, the more light can reach your sensor, the cleaner your photo is going to be. The next general tip is to underexpose your night photos a bit, and there's 3 reasons for that. First of all, most of the time your camera actually overexposes the photo to something brighter than what the scene actually looked like in reality. Secondly, it allows you to preserve your highlights that are easily to be blown out if shooting at night, usually at a higher ISO. And additionally, by underexposing, you also make the shadows darker, meaning that everything distracting in these shadows will become darker and therefore less distracting. The next general tip is to shoot your camera in mechanical shutter, because usually when we're talking about these bright light sources at night, we're talking about artificial light, and that artificial light usually goes bright and dark in a very, very high frequency that for us and the human eye, it looks like they are always on, the lights. But the camera actually picks up that these lights are flickering. And that can mean that your exposure looks very weird if you shoot on electronic shutter due to readout issues. And this can be alleviated when you shoot your camera in mechanical shutter. So don't shoot an electronic shutter, but be sure to use your mechanical shutter if possible. The next tip is to go out when it rains, because all the light sources that I have been mentioning in this video will actually be amplified through their reflections on the ground that occur when it's wet or when it rains. Additionally, when it rains, you will also have plenty umbrella and hat people in the street that, in my opinion, make for amazing subjects for your photo. And if you want to know more on how to create the cleanest photos in low light, no matter the equipment you use, then feel free to check out this video up here, in which I explain all of that in detail. And now it's your turn. Is there any lighting techniques that I might have missed in my video? Feel free to drop them in the comment section below, because it can be interesting both for me as well as for our great photographic community. And with that being said, I think that was all I had to say. And well, I hopefully see you in next week's video.